Okay, so yesterday I discussed the New York Islanders, and today I want to discuss Carolina. And why am I going in this order? Well, see, both the Islanders and Carolina looked like they had upward momentum last year, and both of them failed to capitalize on it this season. So before we get to the draft and before we get to everything else, and you know the big thing right now, the elephant in the room is Ron Francis. Ron Francis out of a job, of course, before the end of the year, and the replacement hasn't been named yet, and it could be any number of people. Um, Tom Dundon apparently is asked a lot of for a lot of advice from former Dallas Stars. So I could see members of the former Dallas Stars getting brought into the organization on some level because he trusts them and talks to them. But here's what we have going forward. Jordan Staal is signed for $6 million through 2022-2023. It might be a little bit more than you want to pay for Jordan Staal, but you know what? They've got lots of cap space. If the cap goes up to $80 million, they have $32 million for next season in cap space. Skinner, $5.75 million. He's up at the end of next year. I don't see him getting a raise if he has another year like he had this year. Williams, $4.5 million. He's up at the end of next year. Williams is clearly frustrated that he's not in the playoffs, and he's not. He's at that stage where he's not going to want to stay with a team that's rebuilding. He's going to want to go to a team that's going to win or retire. Victor Rask has a $4 million a year contract through 2021-2022. Teravainen signed for $2.86 million next year, and then he's an RFA with arbitration rights. Elias Lindholm is an RFA now with arbitration rights. That'll lead into that $32 million, but not a lot. Stempniak's UFA, Ryan's UFA. I think they'll bring Ryan back. I think Stempniak goes. Nordstrom's a restricted free agent with arbitration rights. Aho signed till the end of next year. He's going to get a raise. McGinn's signed through the end of next year. He'll be an RFA with arbitration rights. And DiGiuseppe is an RFA now that the season's over. And they've got Kruger buried in the minors, but it still counts as a 2.058 cap hit if they don't buy him out. So $2.058 million in cap. For Carolina, it's not a big deal, but you have to start asking yourself, if you're a Carolina fan, and we'll get into this, like, where is this building towards? What did this season do? Justin Falk, $4.83 million on the blue line through 2019-2020, and he's a UFA after that. Noah Hannafin is up for renegotiations now. Noah's going to get paid. Klaas Dahlbeck, RFA with arbitration rates. Trevor Van Riemsdyk, RFA with arbitration rates. Brett Pesce signed through 2023-2024 at a reasonable cap hit of $4.025 million. Jacob Slavin through the same year at $5.3 million. So those two signed for about $9.5 million between the two of them. And I think that's reasonable. In net, Scott Darling is still signed for $4.15 million through 2020-2021. Cam Ward's a UFA. So you can keep Darling and lose Ward. I think Ward probably sticks around for one more year. I don't know that there's a big market for him elsewhere. And again, part of the problem is this line here. These are the points they recorded and the year ending of those points recorded. So 83 points this year, 87 last year, 86 the year before, 71, 83, 42. That's the lockout shortened season, 82, 91, 80. Other than the 91-point season in 2010-2011, it's a disappointing total. And that 87 last year, they had a pretty good run in the second half, and it looked like they were really turning things around. Last summer, we were talking about how Ron Francis has been patient. It's been a lot of years of not making the playoffs, and this year they should finally do it. This is why rebuilding is tricky. But if you notice, they've never really done a full-on teardown. They've never gone to the bottom and picked up that really solid number one pick. The closest you can get is Noah Hannafin. So in terms of their defense, you got Hannafin, Falk, Fleury's back for one more year before he's an RFA. And it looks decent. The problem with Carolina is, looking at what they have, and before I get to the prospects and we discuss that, again, they're middle of the road. They're good enough to win some games. They're probably going to lose their share of games, and they probably miss the playoffs. There's no movement in that direction. And so for that reason, I can understand Tom Dundon looking at these numbers, realizing this one was going to be lower than that one, and saying, this doesn't work. Whatever Ron Francis is doing, while I may respect him, it doesn't work. Ron Francis could turn around and say, hey, I haven't been able to spend money. This organization doesn't spend money, and I haven't been allowed to spend, or doesn't make money, and I haven't been allowed to spend it. And that has definitely hampered efforts of the Carolina Hurricanes to improve. This is where, when people talk about the salary cap keeping everything equal, I go, yeah, but there's a reason that Carolina and Florida and Arizona stay near or at the bottom of the league. It is hard to compete when you're trying to spend to the cap floor and realize you can't afford to spend to the cap ceiling. So teams that spend to the cap ceiling, does it guarantee them a playoff spot? No. Does it mean they have a better chance? Yes. Now, prospects. Nikash, Fogel came up and had a very good couple games at the end of the year. Jake Bean, McEwen. I think McEwen will get a good look on that blue line. Booth and Nedeljkovic in net. Booth had a good 4 games for the Charlotte Checkers. Nedeljkovic, his numbers for Charlotte, not fantastic, but honestly, AHL numbers can be difficult to equate with NHL. There's some goalies who play better at the NHL than in the AHL, and some who play better in minors than they do in the NHL, and that's the way it rolls. So until I see either of them with a decent amount of games in the NHL, I'm not going to make a statement about them. I do know that Callum Booth was well thought of when he was drafted. He's lost some of that, but if he can get it back, and you look at Jack Campbell in LA as an example of a guy who's got it back, then maybe there's hope for one of these guys emerging as a backup to Darling if they let Ward go. I just can't see it. Sarala and Kokkonen will get their shots at making the roster in the fall as well. Maybe Sarala can be that 2/3 guy. Maybe Nikash can come in and finally be that number 1 center that Carolina covets. But with all of this cap space and the pressure to get better and a brand new owner, and you're going to have a new GM, do you know what a new GM can do to really make the fans excited? Sign John Tavares. And I know, why would Tavares go there? He wants to go somewhere that can win. Yeah, but it's the East Coast, and it's a team that's young, and there's definitely room for improvement. You add Tavares to this team, immediate improvement. Should be playoffs. And I say should be because this total didn't improve this year when it really probably should have. And this is the dilemma with the Carolina Hurricanes. They're good in a lot of areas. There's a lot of good players, a lot of, you look at this blue line, Falk, Hanifin, Slavin, Pesce, and then Fleury and probably Trevor Van Riemsdyk. You've got a really solid top 6. But is it going to compete with the best in the East? Probably not. It's just solid. Their forwards, it's a solid group. There's a lot to like with certain players, but when you look at it as a whole, it lacks something. It lacks a superstar. You add Tavares to this team, problem solved. Then you can go out and find a new goalie. You buy out Darling and go out and find a new goalie. Maybe in the fall, maybe we're talking about how smart Carolina is because they managed to go out and fix their goaltending problem, getting rid of Darling, let Ward walk as a free agent. They pick up somebody else, and maybe Booth's their backup on an entry-level contract. I guess my problem is this. Last summer I talked up a lot about how I felt that Carolina was going to be good enough to make the playoffs. They're not. And they weren't. And they went through periods this year where they looked pretty darn good, and they looked like they should make the playoffs, and then they fell out again. They lack that presence that you need to grind out the 82 games and make the postseason. So right now, their top draft pick would be number 11. So unless they move up or they move down, it's the number 11 draft pick. That's why I have number 1 draft pick on there, like their first round draft pick. Now, if they could win the draft lottery, not likely, but if they could win the draft lottery, then this blue line, you add Rasmus Dahlin to it, and now we're talking. Because then you have Dahlin, you have Hanifin, Slavin, Fleury. Falk then becomes a guy that you're trading. Falk would go. And maybe Falk can help you address your problems up front. And getting rid of Falk would be a $4.83 million cap hit that you're getting rid of. So, you know, the draft lottery could be huge. That's why I'm just keeping these things general, because until we know what happens at the draft, it's hard to say. But it is interesting to look now in April, as these teams are out of the playoffs, at where are they going. And again, it all comes back to Ron Francis. Years as GM, the team's not a whole lot better now that he's off of it as the general manager than when he took over. It's young. There's a lot of pieces to like. Picking up Teravainen from Chicago looked brilliant. But maybe it's just artificially keeping them up above or at 500 and preventing them from falling down in the standings, and really picking up those top-notch prospects they need in order to build towards a second Stanley Cup. Because that's really what everybody's trying to build towards. So there you go. That's the cap-friendly version of the future of the Carolina Hurricanes. And again, with guys like Jake Bean and Roland McEwen, and who knows where any of these guys end up in the fall. It's hard to say. And until I know what happens at the draft table and until we see free agency, there is a lot of guesswork, but it's interesting to look at. At least to me it is. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Who does Carolina need to add? Is Tavares a natural fit here? There's no pressure in Carolina. And they need that superstar player. So let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.